years, but she has produced far more than I have in terms of the study of Assyrians, immigrants to this country, and how they settled down. She is an anthropologist by training, and she has been working on these projects and many more, both in Turlock through interviews and through collecting of materials. We're very proud of her that she has been able to do all this very, very steadily without giving up, and we know that she has a good deal to tell us about here. She is also the leading authority on the writings and life of our poet, William Daniel, poet and musician. Some of Arianne's books are New Lamps for Old, published in 2010, Familiar Faces in Unfamiliar Places, between 1911 and 2010, also published in 2010, William Daniel, Portrait of an Assyrian Icon in 2015, and coming up 3 other books. One is a reworking in 3 volumes of Fatina Jabara, The History of the Assyrians in Hamadan, and The Last Days of Atlakandi. We know there's a lot more to do about Assyrians, and she will be doing it, and we're very, very proud of her for that. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Arianne Ishaya.
Thank you, Eden, for the introduction. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Eden Nabi and Vladi Wakadas for arranging this memorable exhibition for us. As I don't know if you have seen it, but as I was walking through, I realized, it came to my mind that the story of those pictures is really a miniature replica of the story of all Americans. People from different parts of the world leaving their homes because either of persecution or poverty, traveling across oceans to this faraway land in the hope of a better life. And Assyrians are part of the story. So let's continue with the journey, and let's take a 2-hour trip to Turlock in the heart of California and visit a vibrant Assyrian community in that town. Let's first start with a background history of Turlock. Turlock came into existence in 1871 as a shipping point for the Southern Pacific Railway. The village was composed of small-scale farmers, and they were not subsistence farmers. They were not producing food to eat. They were producing food to sell, mostly fruits, grapes, almonds, peaches. So they were fully integrated into the American market economy. Believe it or not, Turlock was known as the watermelon capital of the world. So let's have a look at Turlock back in 1912. This is the main street, and it's a watermelon capital. At the far end, you will see a Ferris wheel, and here are the pony parades going on. And there was only one hotel at that time in Turlock, and it was called the Alamo Hotel. And you will see the Alamo tire right there. And the hotel also served as the post office and a library. I want to go back for a minute to mention something here. As you see, there are grapes at the background of a slideshow. I'm thankful to my daughter Ninva, who's sitting there. She purposely picked up grapes to symbolize the connection between Turlock and Urmia for the Assyrians. Thank you, ma'am. So now we go to the watermelon contest. As you see, there's this boy, seems to have outrun all the other contestants, and he's going to get a prize for winning the contest. At that time, transportation in Turlock, back in 1912, it was just by horse and buggy. The roads were not paved, and one of my informants, by the name of Abram Joseph, told me that Gear Road, which now is a thoroughfare in Turlock, at that time it was full of sand up to the knees. Turlock, at the very beginning, the very first settlers of Turlock were Irish people. And after them came large settlements of Swedes. So that Turlock at that time was known as a Swede town. And then came the Portuguese, the Assyrians, after them Mexican Americans, and last of all came the Japanese. So from the very beginning, Turlock was a multi-ethnic community. However, each ethnic group insulated itself within their own members. So they spoke their own language, practiced their own customs, and so they were insulated in their own compounds. The only time they came together as a total community was at the marketplace, at the post office, at the bank. The real melting pot was the school, where the children learned English and they had a uniform education. My information about the Assyrian settlement of Turlock comes from several years' research and residence in Turlock, where I collected family histories and studied the economic and political history of Turlock in general. Then in 2010, I published my research under the name of Familiar Faces in Unfamiliar Places. The picture that you see in the background kind of represents the title of the book. At the background is Turlock, and you see the California Market written on that building. It's the main street. And right in the center of it is an Assyrian family. Back in their village, standing in the balcony of their cottage, eating grapes from their own vineyard. And the little girl there happens to be me. The reason why I'm pointing at myself is to let you know that I'm part of the story. Oh. I'm presenting an insider's view here.
But that's not in Turlock, right?
That's back home, but then they came and settled in Turlock, yes. What I found out during my research was that Turlock is a unique settlement in all of America. First of all, because unlike the settlements in the East and the Midwest of USA, it was established as a farming colony. This is unique. The only farming colony in the United States, where the Assyrians could practice their traditional skills as farmers. Second, unlike the other Assyrian settlements in the United States, the people who came as refugees after World War I, because they were uprooted from their homes, the Assyrian colony and settlement was before World War I. These people came in the year 1910, before World War I. Third, unlike the other settlements, it was a mass settlement. The people who came to settle in the East and the Midwest of the United States came as an individual refugee families. And then once they were here, they applied to bring their relatives across. So it's called, the process is called chain migration. But the Assyrian settlement in Turlock was a mass settlement, and I will explain how it came about. The mastermind behind this settlement was an Assyrian by the name of Ishaq Adams. Ishaq Adams came to America as a young man with only $25 in his pocket. But he was educated with the help of the American Presbyterian Mission. He got a degree in theology and another degree in medicine. And after graduation, he went back home and started a school in his village, Waziraba. He was a very resourceful person, not only highly educated. He wrote two books. One was called Persia by a Persian, another one was called Darkness and Daybreak. He acted as a cultural broker in the sense that he was one of the first people who introduced Americans to the Persian culture and way of life. What he would do is that he would travel throughout the American cities dressed in native costume, and he would talk about the Persian culture and way of life. Here is a picture of the four brothers. These are all his own brothers, dressed in native costumes. On the left side is Isaac Adams himself, and then on the right side is the Highlander's costume. In the middle is the costume of a Muslim clergy, and in the front is another Persian costume. Isaac Adams married Sarah from a very distinguished Assyrian family. And he raised a family, this is the family he raised in Turlock. All of them married Assyrians, raised their families there. And except for Clara, who came and lived in San Jose after she got married. I met Albert, he was still alive when I was doing my research, and he gave me these family pictures of his. Although Assyrians live in different parts of the Middle East, the settlement in Turlock, those people came expressly from the Urmia region in northwest Iran. This is the town of Urmia with its satellite villages all around it. This is the village of Qarajalu, where this exhibit is named after. And this is the village of Waziraba, where Isaac Adams came from. Believe it or not, Isaac Adams established his very first Assyrian settlement not in the United States, in Canada, back in 1903. And you might wonder, why would the Assyrians leave their homes, their families and friends, and travel all the way across the world to come and settle down in Canada? Well, there are some good reasons for that. First of all, as Christians in Iran, Assyrians were treated as second-class citizens. They were called infidels, and a lot of resources were not available to Assyrians at that time. And second, in the Urmia region, most of the land was owned by Muslim landlords. So Assyrian farmers were really sharecroppers. So when they heard that Canada was opening the western lands for settlement, and due to the Homestead Act, each family that settled there would get 160 acres of free land. That was very tempting for Assyrians, to become freeholders and live in a Christian country. So they came and settled in the province of Saskatchewan, in the city that now is called North Battleford. There are still Assyrian families living in North Battleford, back from that settlement. So, but you know what? The harsh winters in the prairies of Canada made farming very difficult for Assyrians. So then Isaac Adams contacted a land company here in California, negotiated with them, and was able to encourage some of the Assyrians in North Battleford to move to California. So those who were willing came with him, and in Chicago he recruited more Assyrians, and at other points he recruited even more Assyrians, and in 1910, 50 people came and settled in Turlock and made that their home. Soon, the Assyrians in Urmia learned about Turlock, and Turlock became a big name for Assyrians. There is an anecdote about a man who was coming to settle in Turlock. He had to stay in New York for a couple of days. When he saw the paved roads, the wide roads, and the high-risers in New York, he exclaimed in surprise, "Baby, in aha Turlock ila, bas in aha New York ila, bas Turlock moila." He exclaimed in surprise, "If this is New York, imagine what Turlock looks like." Well, from 1910 to 1940, the Assyrians recreated the life they had back in Urmia. There were no TVs, there were no telephones. Most of them had their meals together as one big family. Women cooked the traditional food, dolma, chipte, rıza, you name it, rishakle, chade. And they even built a tanura, the earthen oven. And there is a picture of it in the exhibition. When you go, you will see it. What was very interesting to me is that nobody was known by their surname. Everybody was known by the village they came from. So they would talk about Avraham Qarajalu, Yuash Titrash, Paulus Guytapa, just like Americans would say Paul San Jose, Joseph San Francisco. This is how they referred to one another at that time. This is a pioneer family of Assyrians in Turlock back in 1920. I found some very interesting information from the Ranchers Directory in Turlock. It gives detailed information about the name of the people, what kind of farm they had, what size it had, even the car they were driving. For example, the first one says, I can't see very much, Alesi, his wife is Adeline, they have 10 acres in alfalfa. That's the very top pictures. And poultry, I can't read. And they even drive a Ford truck, 23, year 23. And the Ranchers Directory had 43 Assyrian family names in there. And notice that they are kind of distributed between Modesto, Turlock, and Ceres. Ceres is a kind of suburb of Turlock, just about 10 minutes by car from Turlock. Okay, here is one Assyrian family that came from Turlock, became very famous in Turlock, Sargis and Sally Hoobyar. They came from Chicago to Turlock. And this is a newspaper clipping from Turlock Journal. This is centennial year, 1971. It shows Robert Hoobyar in traditional Assyrian costume. And also notice here, it also talks about the Assyrian American Civic Club that was first opened in 1946. I want now to talk about the landmarks that exist in Turlock. Even though Assyrians in Turlock compose only between 3 to 4% of the total population. Yet they are the most visible ethnic group in Turlock. Why? Because they have so many landmarks titled Assyrian on them. So you cannot miss the name. So I will just give you a few examples. These are a few examples, not all of them. This is the very first non-denominational church that was built in Turlock, dating back to 1924. Unfortunately, it was demolished. It does not exist anymore. This is the Assyrian Evangelical Church in Turlock, and this was built in 1950s. St. John's Assyrian Presbyterian Church. The original building was built in 1927, and it was called the Assyrian Church of Turlock. But later on, they expanded it and they changed the name to St. John's Presbyterian Church, and that was done in the 1940s. The Assyrian Church of the East, St. Thomas Assyrian Chaldean Catholic Church. Oh, before that we have the Larsa Hall. It's more recent, built in 1980s and belongs to the Church of the East. It's the Banquet Hall that belongs to the Church of the East. And then this is the St. Thomas Assyrian Chaldean Catholic Church in Turlock. Now we go to civic organizations. Notice they all have the name Assyrian on them. And particularly if you're driving on Highway 99, you cannot miss this building. Look at the central column. It has the Lamassu, the winged bull, the Assyrian winged bull on it. And notice those conical shapes decorate the building. Well, they are copies of the original city of Nineveh. As you see those conical shapes on the walls that are imitated by the building in the civic club. And this is the Nahrain Cultural Center located in Sargis. Again, you notice the conical shape on the walls. I want now to talk about some of the prominent Assyrians in Turlock. This is John Sargis, highly educated pioneer in Turlock. He was a dentist, and he had 40 acres of very good land in Keys. Now, 40 acres for Assyrians at that time was very prosperous because most of them had 10 to 20 acres of farmland. His daughter told me that his house was a sightseeing site because it was the only house in the area that had indoor plumbing, and his bathroom was tiled, so people came to see the bathroom. Philip Malik, a very enterprising person, he built a mobile home in Sargis, and guess what? He called it the Nineveh Estates, after the capital of Nineveh. And all the streets, I drove through the compound, all the streets had Assyrian names. Shamiram Street, Hammurabi Court, so on and so forth. You remember Uncle Ben's converted rice? Well, he is the inventor, Milton Malik, an Assyrian from Guitaba. I want to talk a little bit about the Assyrian contributions to Turlock. Even though we have been such a small ethnic group in Turlock, it's amazing how much our people have contributed to the culture and the horticulture of Turlock. I'll give you some examples. Joseph Adams, Odysseus Bacchus, Albert Temras, and George Peters, to name a few, donated part of their land in order to open up 9th and 10th Street and other roads that were too narrow. They made them wider. A real estate agent, developer by the name of Jerry James, he developed a whole area in Turlock and named 2 of the streets after the name of his sons, Kenneth Street and Edward Street. If you go to Turlock, try to find those streets. Jerry James later moved to Turlock and he became a millionaire by building high-risers on the lakeshore. Chicago. Did I say Turlock? That name keeps just fixated in my brain. Chicago. Moved to Chicago, became a millionaire there. And this tradition was carried by other Assyrians. Even later on, the Burang family, for example, one of their members is a real estate developer. He developed an area in Turlock, and you'll find Burang Street in one of the major avenues where he has built homes. Now, if you go to the library at the California State University in Stanislaus, you will find this specimen on the wall. It is a rubbing on a rice paper with inscriptions both in Chinese and in the Assyrian language dating back to the 8th century AD. The script below is the name of all the bishops, Assyrian bishops, that have served in China. As you enter the building, the library at the California State University of Stanislaus in Turlock, you will find the bust of Queen Shamira and King Ashurbanipal, and these were donated by our artist, Fred Farhad. Next, you will find in the same library, it's the donation of Reverend Ishu Sayad. It contains over 1,000 volumes of rare and priceless books on Assyrian history, culture, and religion. Today, Turlock is no longer a farming community. It has become a service center with department stores, strip malls, supermarkets, and it is like a bedroom community to the major metropolitan centers of San Jose and San Francisco. As to Assyrians, it has become a retirement home for the Assyrians. In recent years, a considerable number of Assyrians from San Jose moved to Turlock, and there are still some families who are in process of moving there. I want to end by answering a question that some of you might have. Turlock. What an odd name. I mean, it looks a little bit strange compared to other names in neighboring cities like Modesto, Sirius, Merced. What does it mean? Where does it come from? Do you remember I said the first inhabitants of Turlock were from Ireland? Well, this is an Irish name. Turlock was a village in Ireland, but we don't have the ch sound in English, so Turlock turned into Turlock. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience once you settled down. Now we have until 4 o'clock to circulate in this room, but at 3:30 we have to start wrapping up in the back, okay? What I want to say about this exhibit, and Vladi, Susan, the two Carols, and I have been working on this for 2 years now. What I want to say about it is that, first of all, it's a joy to work with all these people. They've been just terrific. And Vladi is very good about answering every email, and so is Carol Kidman and Carol Beatty. So we're very grateful to them for working with us on this. The value, thank you again. The value of this exhibit I see in two directions. First, it gives us a chance to study our culture from multiple angles. It's not just a question of what did the missionaries write about us in Urmia, what did other people write about us during the genocide, especially Assyrians, but it tells us also about other aspects of our lives as Assyrians, both in this country and in the Urmia region. You will understand if you've seen the exhibit that this man came from Qarajalu, look at the map, came from Qarajalu all the way to New York, to Minneapolis to study medicine, came back to New York because all of his Assyrian pals were there, and then he met this Irish woman. They got married, and they went all the way back across the Atlantic and all the way back to Qarajalu. They didn't go to Julpasha. That's where I'm from. But they went to Qarajalu. So then, as you will look through the exhibit, you will see that they did very, very well because he was an American-trained medical person. He was hired by a sub-governor of, in Azerbaijan, a Qajar nobleman, in order to serve everybody in Ardabil first, in Hoy, in Salmas, and so on. So he did very well financially as an American-trained physician of considerable quality. Because did you see the little jar that the family has kept with the bullet that he pulled out of somebody's leg and the tooth that he pulled out of somebody's mouth? I mean, he brought all these from Iran all the way over here to Santa Clara. It's just amazing. And the second amazing thing is that the family kept them. So we have other means of studying our Assyrian history than the usual printed sources. And he also produced a periodical, which nobody knew about, and I'm grateful to Abu Zaytun for pointing it out, that we do have this periodical. There are digital copies of it online, so anyone who wants to look at it and read it, be my guest. The other thing that we need to learn from this exhibit, I think, is that there may, in fact, be other collections hiding somewhere in people's homes. People who don't, maybe they can't read the languages anymore. Maybe they don't even know who the people are, or only some of them. We need to collect this material and preserve it. And how do we do that? I don't have a method for it. We found this quite by accident, this collection, but surely there are ways that our organizations can begin to ask their members, can begin to look around to see what is there, what is going to be thrown out in another 5 years if we don't collect it. And in conjunction with that, we need to realize that there are ways of archiving these materials. So the letters from this collection, the 150 plus letters, will go to Berkeley, as I mentioned earlier, and they will be archived. There is an endowment for that, and we are going to add money to that, also from Harvard, because this is a collection about Iran. We have money from Harvard for it. And this is going to be archived for future generations. It'll be digitized. But we need to collect other materials, not just from Iran, but especially from the highlands, as Arianne says, or Hakkari, because that's where we have very, very little material preserved. So the lesson of this exhibit is that it can be done. It can be done with a lot of people collaborating together, and especially with the descendants. And hopefully that journal that he kept for 30 years is something that we can work on and publish as well, in cooperation with the family. I thank you all for coming. I think this has been a wonderful experience for me for 2 years to get to know you people out here on the West Coast. I'm going to go back to Massachusetts and rest, and I hope that you will ask your friends to come and see this exhibit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Assyrians and friends of Assyrians. My name is Julian Mogadassi. Starting Sunday, April 3rd, there will be an exhibit about modern Assyrians that runs through June 5th at the Sunnyvale Heritage Park Museum. From Qarajalu to Santa Clara, an Assyrian family's multiple Atlantic crossings in search of a home at the turn of a century. There will also be 4 lectures with the following details. The first lecture is on Sunday, April 3rd at 1 p.m. It is titled New Urmi in the Place of the Old by Dr. Arianne Ishaya. The second lecture will be on Sunday, May 1st at 1 p.m. It is titled Joseph D. Joseph, M.D., A Link in the Assyrian Chain of Medicine by Dr. Samir Jonah. The third lecture will be on Sunday, May 15th at 1 p.m. It is titled Sources and Selected Details of the Life of Dr. Joseph D. Joseph, a son of Qarajalu, a man of Santa Clara County, by Vladimir Mogadassi. As a special treat, the lecture on May 15th will be given in the Assyrian Neo-Aramaic language, similar to the one that Jesus spoke. The fourth lecture is on Sunday, June 5th at 1 p.m. It is titled Reflecting on the Old Country, the Assyrians of the Urmi Nation, by Dr. Nicholas Algilu. There will also be a tea and coffee reception on all 4 Sundays. The website is qarajalu2santaclara.com, and it will be available after April 3rd. All lectures and exhibit will be available at the Sunnyvale Heritage Park Museum. Parking is free at the museum, and admission is also free. The exhibit starts on Sunday, April 3rd, and runs all the way to June 5th, 2022.